Episode 7. This was meant to be a 5-part series and we're now up to episode 7. So, the lights are on. Mr. Corenflaw has just put Benj to bed and he's getting me set up. Now, it's come to my attention that Mr. Corenflaw seems to be the star. Yeah, the most preferred star of this show. He's like Magnus Gabansky in Kath and Kim. He always features as a special guest appearance, but he tends to always be in the show. So we had a really serious talk. All the editors of the show and I sat around the board meeting today and had a big talk about how we could incorporate him more into the breastfeeding episode. And apart from demonstrating breastfeeding with him, which when I'm pregnant or breastfeeding, no one but my child goes near my breast. I'm really a bit repulsed by it. So let's face it, he hasn't been there in 5 years. So, no.
And I haven't got my netball bib.
And he hasn't got his netball bib. That was a good Kath and Kim reference. So he is going to feature highly next week. We are going to do our final hurrah, episode 8. Like a Netflix series, and we're going to talk all about post-birth, and we're going to just be really real about relationships and what it was like to be new parents. And we thought that would be really nice to be a bit raw, so he will feature in those episodes. All right, so breastfeeding. First of all, I'm going to say this probably isn't going to be as epic as the other shows, total disclaimer, and that's because there are a lot of amazing people that do great things in this space. I'm also not a lactation consultant. It's on my to-do list, but I haven't got there yet. So there's 2 people that I really wanted to recommend tonight and refer you to their services and their information, and the other people, and then I'll talk about some other people in your local areas. So the first one is Christine Ratcliffe. I used to work with her in New South Wales. When I was a wee little student, she mentored me, and she now has Lotus Lactation, and so she can do services via webcam, so online services for people in New South Wales. So just a little shout out to her. The other person that I refer people to all the time, and this is because she has a lot of free information, B, she has her own technique, which I'm going to talk a little bit about, but it's not my technique, so I can't talk a lot about it. You have to go to her for more information. Is Robin Thompson. So I refer a lot of women to her page. You can get stuff for free, you can buy her programs, and you can have one-on-one with her as well. And she has got what's called the Thompson Method. I'm going to talk about that briefly. The other people I really want to mention are the Australian Breastfeeding Association. So when I care for people in the antenatal period, I often say to them, please do as much research about breastfeeding and parenthood as you do about labour and birth. And no one does. And that's because when you're having your first baby, you are so focused on that baby coming out, and it's really hard to see past that. And then all of a sudden that baby's out, and you have to care for it and keep it alive, and you want to feed it. And the majority of people want to breastfeed. Our success rates in Australia are extremely low, especially in terms of exclusively breastfeeding, which means baby only has breast milk and is breastfed, and beyond 6 weeks. So 6 months, it's even lower, and our rates are extremely low. So the World Health Organization says that we should breastfeed our babies our baby should only have breast milk up until 6 months, and that it's ideal to breastfeed your baby up to 2 years. So that's recommended by the World Health Organization. Pregnancy brain has just kicked in. I don't know what I'm talking about. So the Australian Breastfeeding Association is an amazing resource as well. They basically have 24/7 counsellors that are on there to provide you support. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, when you're thinking, has my baby had enough? Am I feeding right? Why am I getting this pain? You can ring them and speak to a real person who has not only breastfed but also trained in breastfeeding counselling, and they can give you information. So my pregnancy brain's just kicked in. I remembered why I was saying that. So we often tell people to get really informed about breastfeeding, and they don't, and then they come into that postnatal period without a lot of information around breastfeeding, and it is a real struggle when you add on the sleep deprivation, the constant night feeds and night wakings. And I, as awful as COVID has been with restrictions, I've got to admit it's been really lovely for people to be able to just be with their baby and focus on feeding and sleeping, which are the two main things that you want to do post-birth. So there's a beautiful saying that says 5 days in bed, 5 days on bed, 5 days near bed, meaning for the first 15 days post-birth, you are really just snuggling with your babe, eating and sleeping. And in a country like Australia, we are extremely privileged to have paid maternity leave that enables us to do that. Obviously, if you have another child, that makes it a lot harder. But for your first baby, that is often a reality that you can do that. I do want to say as well that every baby breastfeeds different. Every person's body breastfeeds different as well. So it makes milk and drains the breast a lot differently based on that child. And just because you've had a really crappy first time with breastfeeding doesn't mean you will have that again. So the biggest point I want to get across tonight, apart from being really well informed, is that how you go into breastfeeding is very similar to how you go into birth. So if you go into your labor and birth, like I've said before, going, this is going to be the most horrendous experience of my life. I'm not going to be able to do it. It's going to be painful and then it will more than likely be that way. Same with breastfeeding. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard, I want to breastfeed if I can do it. If I can breastfeed, then I will. And that failure is already there in your head. That but disbelief in you, yourself, and your ability is already there, and that has a lot to do with society. So as you know, I've worked a lot in remote Aboriginal communities, and I've worked a lot overseas. And when I worked in the Solomon Islands, I never ever gave any information out about breastfeeding. Those women practiced breastfeeding before they had their first child with cousins' babies or sisters' babies, nieces and nephews. They practiced it. They knew what it was like. They also grew up watching it. And I often say to people, if you want to help other women breastfeed, get your boobs out and breastfeed in public. Don't cover up. It is not a crime. You are giving your baby food. And we are really happy to accept in our society, unless you're vegan, drinking another animal's milk. And I drink milk, but it is really weird that as an animal we drink another animal's milk, but yet we are totally okay with that, and we're not okay with the fact that humans are drinking human milk. And the more we grow up seeing it and the more normal it is, the more you pick up from observation. Yeah, we learn from observation. We know that our children learn to crawl and stand and walk, and they do things from watching us. And breastfeeding is exactly the same. I know it's really hard. I can remember I had a friend over once. We were studying a subject for our masters. This was years ago now, and Mick and I had been together maybe 3 years. We were living together, and this woman came over, and she wasn't a close friend. We were just studying together, and she was studying with a 6-week-old baby. She was absolutely amazing. And she started breastfeeding her baby, and Mick got really weird. And I said to him afterwards, why did you do that? And he said, my whole life I've been told, don't look at my breasts, look into my eyes, don't look at my boobs, don't look at my boobs, don't look at my boobs. And then all of a sudden you're breastfeeding and your boobs are out, and I'm being trained my whole life not to look. And then there's a woman there breastfeeding in front of me, and so I feel awkward. And I thought it was a really, really valid point, because we're so happy to see breasts on billboards and on Instagram and in bikinis at the beach. We're even happy for women to be topless on the beach. And when you breastfeed, you cover the whole areola. There is not much of the boob that you do see. Sometimes you do see a bit, and when the baby comes on and off, you might see the nipple. But you don't see a whole lot. But it's because we don't see it that we're not comfortable with it. And so really encourage breastfeeding in public, and for you to feel comfortable to do that, because you are just giving your human what it is designed to have and what you've been designed to make for it. The other thing I really wanted to comment on was what's called a Breastfeeding Friendly Hospital Initiative. So some hospitals are what's called BIFI, which is Breastfeeding Friendly Health Initiative. Some hospitals have this accreditation. So it's an accreditation, it's an extremely hard process that hospitals and their whole staff work their absolute butts off to get. And it's a real accomplishment when a hospital has this. Sometimes I think that because a lot of people don't understand what this means, it can come across like the staff in certain places where you birth your babies may be pushy around breastfeeding. And there's a horrible term called nipple Nazis, and you feel like you are unable to not breastfeed because of the attitudes in the staff. So what I want to do is actually tell you what that's about. So breastfeeding friendly means that there's 10 steps that the hospital follows, and they include informing women around breastfeeding, training all staff around breastfeeding, encouraging the mother and baby to stay together, not using dummies, all these different things that we know evidence-based supports breastfeeding. And so there's lots of different steps that they have to cover. So when a midwife comes into your room and there's a dummy in the cot and they talk to you about it, it's not because they desperately want you to breastfeed, it's because they're following the policies of their hospital. There was the whole breast is best for a long time, and then it was fed is best, and now we really try and say informed and supported is best. Just like I've said, I don't care how or where you birth as long as it's the right choice for you, the same thing goes with feeding. I don't care how you feed or what you feed your baby. Obviously it has to be breast milk or formula. It has to be a safe liquid for the baby to have, but it has to be a choice that's right for you and your family. And I would much prefer to care for a person who says to me, I'm not comfortable with breastfeeding, I really want to formula feed, and for me to be able to demonstrate how to safely formula feed and them go home safely formula feeding, then play this game where you think you need to please me and I'm helping you with breastfeeding, and then you go home and you don't know anything about formula feeding. So it's really important to be informed about what choices you want to make with feeding and feel comfortable to talk through those with your care provider. So whilst informed and supported is best, I am going to say that breast milk is a better product in terms of nutrition. I am currently living on chapped potatoes and Mentos. I am not feeding myself in the best way possible, and that is okay because I'm in first trimester and I'm in survival mode, and that's fine. But I know that there are better things for me that are more nutritious, as we all do. Breast milk is specifically designed for human babies with lots of different amazing things in it to protect them and help them grow. So I don't like the fed is best because it's not accurate. It's not best. Fed is good. Fed is needed. Fed is really crucial to survival, but it is not best. And so, yeah, I think as long as you're informed and supported and know that there are so many benefits for mum and baby in terms of breastfeeding, and I'm not going to rattle them off. If you're watching this, you've got an interest in breastfeeding and you want to do it. So I've mentioned like Lotus Lactation and Robin Thompson. I'm also going to talk about the Australian Breastfeeding Association. So I talked about their counsellors, but their website has an amazing abundance of free information, from how to express breast milk to how to store it to lots of different things around nipple shields and low supply, engorgement. Every breast issue you can think of is there on their website. So please have a read. They've got classes at the moment that are $25 for members. If someone wants to buy you a present, apart from core and floor, an Australian Breastfeeding Association membership is a beautiful present to get. And it was something that one of my really good friends brought me as a mother and a midwife with my first baby, and it was invaluable. So I can't think off the top of my head how much. It's $100 and something for the membership, but it's definitely worth it. It comes for a year, and they send you this book that is so informative. It's in the easiest language to understand. It covers everything from even like sex and breastfeeding, things you don't even really think about. It covers it. So I highly recommend it. I've got it over there in my drawer. I should have had it to show you tonight. Sorry. I had a lot of things happen today that occupy my mind. So I'm going to start at the start with breastfeeding and go through what happens and in a normal, healthy infant. Obviously, there's lots to this. There's breastfeeding premies, and there's stuff around tongue ties and things like that. I'm probably not going to go into them in too much detail. I am watching myself tonight, so if you've got a question, please feel free to pop it up, and we can hopefully make this a little bit more interactive. I will say that breastfeeding success is influenced by your partner and how they support you with breastfeeding and what their attitudes are and what they think of it, and then your network. So if your friends breastfed, if your mother breastfed, if your sisters or aunties or cousins, having people around you that have breastfed is so important. And it's just really supportive, and it means that you can ring them and say, this is happening, and they can say, yeah, that happened to me too. Obviously, like anything, it's much better to go to evidence and really good information sources, but that support really helps. Also gonna say that this is a learned skill for women. So I had been a midwife for 10 years before I had my son, and I can remember 2 weeks into breastfeeding being like, why is this not working the way I thought it would? I know everything, so this should work. And I had to stop and tell myself what I tell families all the time, and that is that breastfeeding is a relationship. It's not just about milk going into your baby's mouth. It is a whole lot more like bonding and comforting and soothing, and it is learning about the individual that you've created and getting to know their personality. There is so much to it, and it's not a natural instinct for us to do, and babies have different reflexes to help them, and there's lots of different things that help babies to breastfeed, but for us it's a learned skill. And if you've gone 33 years without ever watching somebody else do this learned skill, and then you try and do it after you've just been pregnant, labored and birthed, you're absolutely exhausted. And then you get given this tiny little human to keep alive with your body, and you don't know anything about it. It's going to be challenging. There's a beautiful little curve that shows that, breastfeeding is extremely challenging at the start when you compare it to formula feeding. So if this was hard and this was easy, formula feeding kind of goes like this. Breastfeeding starts off much harder, and then it decreases and gets a hell of a lot easier, and it becomes much more easier than formula feeding. But it takes a good 6 to 12 weeks for some people. So I like to refer it, just like I do in my courses when we're talking about core and pelvic floor health, I like to refer it to learning a new skill, like playing the piano or learning a language. If I came into your room after you'd just given birth and I tried to teach you how to play piano, I would not walk out of there half an hour later with you being able to play a song or speak fluently in another language. But if we practiced every 3 hours, all day long, all night long for 6 weeks straight, chances are at the end of that 6 weeks, you're not going to be the Beatles, or you're not going to be some, Germans. Germans always have like 600 different languages. You're not going to be, you're not going to have it down pat, but you're going to be pretty bloody good at it. And that's how you really need to look at breastfeeding. You need to give yourself time. You also need to know that it hurts. People that say that breastfeeding doesn't hurt have never breastfed before. Your nipples are a really sensitive body part. If you got your nipple out right now, go on, get them out, get your nips out. If in doubt, whip them out. That's what I say about breastfeeding. I love that saying. And you were to rub your nipple now for half an hour to 45 minutes. What do you think it's going to feel like? It's going to start getting a bit sore. If you then did that every 3 hours, 24/7, it's going to get sore. It shouldn't be injured. It shouldn't be cracked or bleeding or blistered, but it will be sore. And that's the truth. If I did that to your leg, if I rubbed your leg for 30 to 45 minutes every 3 hours, 24/7, you would get an injury on your leg. Or it would become a sore. And so it's important to go into breastfeeding knowing that you will experience discomfort. It may be painful for you. The important thing is knowing how to prevent damage. So the one thing I really highly love, this is just a personal thing that I love, are hydrogel discs by the company called Riteaid, Riteaid. So if you Google them now, it'll come up. It's a white and purple packet. They're about $13 from the chemist. They look like party feet gels. They're the round gels. And you place them on your nipples and you wear them the whole time that you're not breastfeeding. If you have superwoman sniffer dog pregnant nose, like most of us get, I can never smell when I'm not pregnant. And then when I'm pregnant, I'm like, I could work at the airport. It's really quite alcoholic, and so you want to make sure that you wipe your nipple down with just a damp cloth, wipe it, dry it before baby attaches to the breast. There's another brand called Multi-Mums. Some people prefer those. It's another option. I prefer hydrogel discs, but that's my personal preference. So it's important to know that they work. Some people use different creams. The hydrogel discs are designed to keep the area dry and help to heal. So the creams offer relief, but not so much healing, whereas the hydrogel discs create a really healing, dry environment. And so they're absolute heaven. You just stick them in the freezer and they're awesome too. When my son was about 10 months old, he bit a chunk out of one of my nipples, and we were away at the time and I didn't have any expressing gear, and so I had to keep feeding. It was excruciating. Like there was an actual chunk taken out. And those hydrogel discs saved my life, really. They saved both our lives. So yes, and the nipple healed quite easily and doesn't look any different now. Not that you're going to see that. I will say, I have a really funny story just to throw in there. When I lived in the Solomons, we didn't have running water in our house, and so there was one little tap that was communal everything. So kitchen, you wash the clothes, you wash yourself, and there was a tiny little bit of bamboo around it, so people couldn't really see, but they could if they wanted to. So I would always take my bra off, but I never took my undies off. And the kids thought it was amazing that I had pink nipples. And so every time they would see me walk for a shower, they gathered each other, the kids and grandma. So grandma in the village was also very surprised by the white lady's nipples and the color of them, and I became a freak show, really. So there's a really nice story for you to have around the color of my nipples. It's nice to be a minority sometimes when you've been the majority for your entire life and realize what it's like to be odd. So when a baby is born, we talked about the fact that it's we don't dry the hands off. So when a baby's born, we try not to dry the hands off because the smell of the amniotic fluid is very similar to the smell of the nipples. So the nipples create this odor, and it smells like the amniotic fluid. So the baby's biggest senses when they're born are smell and touch. And so if you've ever breastfed a baby, they're real handsy. They want to touch the boobs, and sometimes they get the hands in their mouth and they suck on their hands, and you're like, get that hand out and just suck on the boob. And it can be a bit challenging because their hands are always there, but they are using them to find the breast. So babies are born seeing in black and white, and the focal point for their eyesight to start to focus is from the breast to the eye. And so when they're first born, they can only see around that much, just like when you wake up in the morning and it's really blurry and you're trying to get your focus on, it's kind of like that for them, and then they get a little bit more of your face every day. But that is why breastfeeding is so good for babies' eyesight. It's also really great for speech development, because sucking on a breast is a lot harder than sucking on the bottle, and so they develop really great muscles in their jaw, and so it's great for speech development. It's also really, has been shown to increase people's IQ. So the more time you spend breastfeeding, the less time you have to spend doing homework later on when they're at school. There's no evidence in that, but there is evidence in the IQ. So when a baby's born, we like you and the baby to be placed skin to skin. Remember, I talked about having skin to skin with your partner is really important in that first 24 hours to rewire their brain. But skin to skin with the birthing person, and we like them to stay there and find the breast on their own if they can, and have a first breastfeed before we weigh them, before we dress them, before we do anything else. They may wee on you and they may poo on you as well during that time. So there's some really beautiful videos out there that I recommend that you Google, called the breast crawl. So if you think about piglets or puppies or kittens, have you ever seen when they're born what they do? Does anyone want to answer me? I can't see any of your comments coming up tonight, but maybe there hasn't been any. So they wiggle around and they crawl around. They might not be able to crawl or walk properly, but they find their way to the nipple. And babies are exactly the same. We're a mammal, they're an animal, and they're an animal, and they try and find the breast. And so they use their sense of smell. The nipple becomes darker so that they can see it more clearly. It becomes bigger so they can see it more clearly. And they sniff around and crawl around until they find it. They also have what's called the stepping reflex. So if you hold a baby up at birth, and do this with your newborn because it's really beautiful to watch. I try and show couples this when I'm showing them when I'm going through a birth check with them. But the baby will step. It does this little moonwalk and it takes these steps, and it only lasts the first couple of days. And what it's doing is it's crawling to the breast, and whilst it's doing that, it's massaging your uterus to help decrease with bleeding. So what should happen is you should place your baby's head on your chest, and this works. It actually works really good if you're laying flat in bed, which we don't often do post-birth, and I'm totally guilty of this. We often sit people up. We don't like typically laying quite flat as humans, especially when we're trying to look at things and do things. We want to be upright, but the breast crawl works really well if you're laying flat. So you lay flat and the baby should bob down. Now you've really got to we're not really holding baby, but we're protecting baby because they're really strong, and what they'll do is they'll fling off and come around. So if you're sitting up, baby will fling down. So you kind of hold their little bots, their little bottoms, and have your hand behind their back so they can't fling back, but you're not actually touching them too much, and you're letting them find the way to the breast. And I always encourage people to help them as you instinctively feel like you should. So if you want to move around and move with your baby, it's almost like this little dance of them trying to find the breast until they find it. So obviously there are things that will affect this. If you haven't had skin to skin contact because you haven't wanted to, or you have had a cesarean and it hasn't been offered to you, or if your baby's premature and or unwell and been resuscitated and taken to the intensive care unit. What I want to say about this is if you don't get this opportunity at birth, it doesn't mean that you can't do this. It doesn't mean in 6 weeks' time when your baby comes out of the NICU, or in 3 days when you come out of ICU, if that's what's happened to you, or any situation that's happened, it doesn't mean that you can't have this time together. And ideally, when you're trying to encourage breastfeeding, you want to do as much skin to skin as you can. So skin to skin just means nickety cuddles, naked cuddles with baby. Obviously, Bub's got a nappy on and you may have some clothes on, but you want as much skin of yours to touch the skin of babies. And there is a lot of evidence now on how this isn't just beneficial for breastfeeding, but it's beneficial to the way our brains work and our connection with our babies and our oxytocin levels and our mental health. I'll pop something up on Instagram. There was a beautiful thing that someone shared with me the other day around skin-to-skin contact in that 4th trimester and how important it is. So don't ever feel like you can't have nickety cuddles with your baby. And if you feel like it, definitely go for it and have them. So the more skin to skin you have, the easier it will be to do this breast crawl, and the more it will encourage babies. And it's always our go-to when babies aren't warm enough. We do skin to skin contact. When babies are really sleepy and haven't woken up and fed, we do skin to skin contact. So it's the first step that we encourage people to do to try and encourage a baby to breastfeed. So what I want you to do now is run your tongue along the roof of your mouth. So start as far back as you can and bring your tongue forward. It tickles now, I've got to scratch my throat. Can you feel where your hard palate ends and your soft palate begins? So the palate is the roof of the mouth. You'll feel all this bit is hard, and then right back here, really itched my mouth, it's soft. That is where the nipple needs to go in the baby's mouth. So all the way back there. Whoops, the tongue's down the bottom B. Jeez, should have known that. So it's all the way back there. And what I like to explain around this is I grew up in New South Wales and we had poppers. Apparently in Victoria, they're called juice boxes. They're going to be called different things because we've got people from all around the world watching this now. But they're, you know what I mean, the carton of juice with the straw in it the kids used to take to school. That's probably discouraged now because it's not healthy. If you had a juice box or anything of a drink with a straw in it and you squeeze the straw, okay, you squeeze the straw. Apart from that tiny little bit at the start, you're not going to get anything out if you're squeezing that straw. Your straw is the nipple, okay? So just squeezing or sucking on the nipple, that looks painful, I've got to stop doing that, isn't going to get anything out, okay? Your juice box or popper or can of drink is the areola. So we've got nipple, areola, and then breast. Stimulating the breast is what makes the milk come out. And so what happens when a baby breastfeeds is the nipple goes all the way back. I should use this. I brought this. This was made in the States and it came like the other day. I was very lucky. It goes all the way back in the baby's mouth, and the mouth is actually over the whole areola and breast. And it's the chin on the breast, the cheeks on the breast, and the nostril. So there's 4 points of contact, and it's that baby sucking at the breast using its tongue and its chin to make the milk come out. So a really common thing, I used to do it a lot in many other places I've worked when babies weren't feeding, is cup feeding. And so when babies aren't attaching to the breast, you can actually get a feeding cup. It's got a proper lip on it, and we used to use medicine cups. And if it's sterile, you can use that too. So you get a sterilized feeding or medicine cup, and you pop it in the smile. Oh, I've got a cup here. Here's something I prepared earlier. This is going to look really disgusting, but I'm going to demonstrate it. You can Google this. You can Google babies cup feeding. I highly recommend writing a list of all these things I'm telling you to Google and watch them because they're really cool pieces of information. So the cup goes into the smile of the mouth. I couldn't talk and demonstrate at the same time. But the baby's tongue comes out and laps at it just like, oh, I'm going to be sick. Just like a baby, a puppy dog would lap at milk. So one more time, doing this for you, tribe. Okay, so that's what the tongue is doing at the breast. And that's why tongue ties can impact breastfeeding. So there's a really cool video on YouTube. It goes for about 3 minutes. Google breastfeeding problems, and it's an American narrated video. The voice is computerized, so it's a bit annoying, but it beautifully demonstrates what normal breastfeeding looks like, so with the nipple all the way back in the soft palate, and it shows you what that tongue and chin are doing to the breast. And then it shows what happens with a tongue tie. So there's different types of tongue ties. There can be cheek ties and lip ties. I'm not going to go into it a lot. It's a whole nother subject. And if you have this, or you suspect it, or you're having issues with breastfeeding, so the biggest thing to know around tongue ties is that you need to look at it as a holistic approach. So if breastfeeding is really painful, if your baby is not putting on weight, if your supply is low, there's those kind of factors come into play with tongue tie, because the baby is not able to create a good vacuum. They are not able to suck properly at the breast. And your breasts, it's a supply demand. So the more your breasts are sucked on, the more your brain is told to make milk, and the more milk you make. Just like during COVID, when we all wanted more flour, still haven't brought any, but we all wanted more flour, we then needed to make more flour to put on the shelves or get it into the shop. So it's exactly the same. The more demand there is, the more supply there is. So if your baby has a tongue tie and that's affecting the vacuum and the suck, you're then not going to be able to, you won't produce as much milk because your body doesn't have that demand. The supply decreases, baby doesn't put on weight, and you have all those factors. And so the tie, that's the tie there. So an anterior tie comes to the front, and so a baby can't do that. They can't stick their tongue out because the tie pulls it back. And so they can be snipped with scissors, and it's like if you cut your nails, it doesn't have any nerves in it. Baby cries and is uncomfortable by it because someone's holding its mouth open. And you can be there or not be there for the procedure, whatever you're comfortable with. And some lactation consultants can do this. I know in the Northern Territory I worked, some did. Here in Victoria, it's done by doctors, so everywhere is different. And then dentists do it as well, and they use laser. So if this is something that you come across in your experiences, you really want involvement by a lactation consultant, and you want a holistic review of what's going on. So there's also posterior tongue ties. They're a bit harder to physically see, but they pull the tongue back, and then there's cheek and lip ties, which is under there. So now that I've shown you the interior of my mouth, it's not something to be concerned about until you're in the postnatal period. So I'm not telling you this information to increase fear. I'm telling you so that you feel a bit more informed, and that you go, oh yeah, B talked about that. Watch the video, be like, yeah, I understand that. Okay, my nipples are sore, that's okay, and expect that. So don't think just because you've got nipple pain, you've got a tongue tie. If there's lots of different factors and someone's mentioned it, I just want you to be a bit more informed, and then you can go from there with it. The other thing I really want to touch on is there's lots of different ways for your baby to have milk, and there are lots of different ways to feeding. It's not just about a baby getting onto the boob or a baby having formula. So you can cup feed at the start, and so cup feeding is really advantageous because you're getting the baby to mimic what it would do at the breast. You're making the baby work hard for it. So my son was born, he didn't have a great sucking reflex because he was born a little bit early. And so he did not attach to the breast very well at all for the first 2 weeks. And so I expressed and topped up. Really important thing, partners and other support people, please don't complain about the noise of the breast pump. I can remember waking up one morning and my husband being like, oh, that noise. It came into my dreams. I very near killed him over that. Don't comment on the noise of the breast pump. They can be quite loud. So I'm going to go through breast pumps in a sec, but there's lots of ways you can feed. So you can have a baby attached to the breast. You can cup feed a baby. You can give a baby milk via a syringe and finger. So you pop your finger into the baby's mouth. Once it starts sucking, you pop the syringe in and you give the baby milk as it sucks. You can do that with formula, you can do it with colostrum. You can cup feed with formula, you can cup feed with colostrum. I didn't cup feed as much as I thought I would because I was absolutely exhausted and I was, waking my baby every 3 hours to feed. I'd stuff around with trying to get him on the breast for 20 to 40 minutes. And then I'd spend 10 to 20 minutes topping him up, and then I would express, and then I'd try desperately to try and get asleep before the next feed. And that went on for the first 2 weeks of his life. And so I didn't cup feed because I was exhausted. But it is a beautiful option if you have the time. And if you're really trying to encourage, especially preemie babies, to get that action happening, or babies with tongue ties who have just had a release of the tie, anything like that, trying to encourage that is great. The other thing you can do, which a lot of people don't know about, is supply line feed your baby. And so this is where, with either formula or breast milk or a combination of both, you pop it into a bottle or a container. There's a special container for these. So a supply line is something that the hospital can supply you with. Some hospitals will supply you with, but you can buy the kit. And so it's a container you fill with milk. It has a line that comes out of it, and you tape the line to your breast right at the end of the nipple. And so it sits like a straw at the end of the nipple, and so the baby attaches to the breast and is sucking and stimulating the breast to make more milk whilst it's getting whatever you have put, either formula or breast milk, express breast milk, into the container. And so the whole idea is that it's trying to work on your supply, but it's also trying to breastfeed and learn how to breastfeed and work hard to do that. So there's supply line, cup feeding, syringe and fed, and then bottle feeding. I will recommend a Calma, C-A-L-M-A. Calma is a type of Medela. So Medela is the brand. Calma is a type of teat. They're really expensive. They're about $18 to $25 just for the teat. It looks like a nipple, and when you're trying to encourage a baby to breastfeed, but you're bottle feeding as a top-up or as just a way to feed baby at the start, it's a really great way to make baby work hard and get those same muscles going for breastfeeding. They don't like it so much. So with Banjo, I would offer the Calma teat. He would probably have 10 to 15 mils with that. And then I would get what we called the easy teat, which basically just shot the milk into his mouth once he got tired, and I just needed to get the volume into him. So you can do a bit of both, but just know that it can be really hard with the Calma teat. Obviously I only had one, and it had a couple of easy teats because we used them a bit more frequently. And when I was exhausted and I couldn't be asked at 3-4 o'clock in the morning, I wouldn't use it, but I would use it in the day. And same advice for anything. You need to do what works for you and your family, and what enables the experience to be enjoyable. When you breastfeed, you get a rush of oxytocin, and that oxytocin really enabled me to not only survive but enjoy motherhood. And I really feel for women who want to breastfeed and can't, or don't breastfeed and don't know about those benefits, because oxytocin, if we could just bottle it up and drink it, I'd be spending all my money just on that. It's the most beautiful hormone, and it's really sad when women get robbed of it. The majority of women, there are women that have issues with supply that are a real medical issue, that are connected to conditions, and women with PCOS, there is information in the literature that they have been linked to having low supply. Just because you have PCOS doesn't mean that will happen to you though, but it's something to be aware of, and to ensure that you do things like skin to skin and link in with a lactation consultant to to facilitate the best breastfeeding journey for you. Other conditions like anorexia will affect it, and same with if you've had a postpartum hemorrhage. It affects your pituitary gland, which releases the hormones for breastfeeding, and so that can affect it too. So there's lots of things that can affect your supply. A lot of them have to do with interventions as well, and being connected with your baby and being separated and all those kind of things as well. So lots of people say, I didn't make enough milk. And, that was definitely that person's experience, but often it's a lot of things that happen around it, and it's kind of like that I just didn't dilate story. It's not your body. Your body hasn't failed. You haven't failed at breastfeeding. There are lots of multifactorial, there's lots of factors, I can't talk properly, that affect that. So please don't think it's you. And if it didn't work last time, please don't think it won't work again. All right, so baby gets on, it hopefully breast calls down to the breast. So the Thompson method is very different to the traditional methods that we teach with breastfeeding. So often with breastfeeding, we say, put the baby's nipple to the nose. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this first, and then I'm going to talk about Thompson method. And I still use the nipple to nose technique a lot, but it's definitely, the evidence isn't supporting it so much. So we say what baby does is it pops the nipple to the nose and it comes over, and just like eating a hamburger, it opens its mouth and comes up and over. And so to do that, we typically hold babies by the back of their neck. And so, I'm losing all my ping pong balls. We hold babies by the neck with our finger and our thumb, and we kind of direct them over. So our hands are on, the palm of our hand is on their shoulder blades, and we direct them that way. And so the Thompson method has shown that can increase nipple pain by around twice as likely to increase nipple pain. And then the Thompson method also talks a lot around having the chin, the nostrils, and the chin, the cheeks, and the nostrils. So the 4 points attached to the breast, and they encourage cradling baby. So rather than holding your breast, holding baby and popping baby on, they encourage just cradling baby and letting baby do what we call rooting. So it goes ha 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 and jumps on, and they actually, Robin Thompson encourages the nipple to be central. So they go ha 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 ha. And so you'll see babies, they'll root around and then really open their mouths big and come onto the breast and take that whole areola with them. And so she states that when one of the 4 points isn't on the breast, that's when nipple pain increases too. So please jump on to her stuff and have a watch of the videos. There's a couple of free 7-minute videos that really explain all of this with a woman actually sitting there breastfeeding, and it's a really beautiful resource. And there's no point me reinventing the wheel there. Your first breastfeed, you really want baby to breast crawl, and if you can do that again and again and again, that's great. It just really helps baby to wire its brain and learn about feeding. And then after there, it's up to you. You'll probably be shown the nipple to nose technique. There's lots of different ways you can feed your baby. I'm just going to try and get my doll. Hang on one sec. Sorry team, I had my doll last week and not this week. So cradling baby is obviously holding baby across like this. So if I was feeding baby, holding baby like that onto the breast. Then there's what we call the football hold. So if this is the nipple, I'm gonna have a really high nipple. Holding baby, and so Bub's bum is sitting in your elbow and you're kind of supporting baby by the neck and shoulders, and Bub comes up and over and onto the breast there. So you're really kind of supporting baby in that way. And then there's Sideline, which is a really lovely thing to do as well. So laying on your side, and then baby's laying side by side with you, so tummy to chest. And I think this works really beautifully because we don't do the whole nipple to nose thing too much here, and we just let baby kind of bob around and find it. So there's lots of different ways you can hold babies, and in the hospital you'll be shown those, but yeah, there's what we call Madonna, there's cradling, there's football, and there's even just like kind of hanging here and letting baby be quite upright and feeding that way too. And I used to baby wear and walk around feeding. So Banj would be upright, I'd get my boob out and he would just feed in my papoose that I would wear with him too. Obviously he was a bit older when that happened. So how much milk do they actually need? I got asked how much colostrum you should take into hospital. As much as you've got. So as much as you can get out, take in. It doesn't matter if you freeze it and then take it home. So you want it frozen, take it in there in a cooler pack, get them to put it in the freezer as soon as you get there. When you take it home the same way. But look on the Australian Breastfeeding Association website for how to express. Feel free to hit me up with questions. I don't feel like anyone has. I haven't seen any comments come through. So when baby is first born, its stomach is really, really tiny, and it's about the size of a marble. So I think it's 5 to 7 mils roughly. So it's really, really tiny. And then after a couple of days, their tummy gets a bit bigger, and then by about 10 days their tummy is even bigger, and then an adult's tummy is the equivalent of a softball, even though we probably eat more than that. So there's totally it does change over those first few days. And so often with breastfeeding it can feel like you're getting really conflicting advice. Obviously our experiences as midwives and the research and evidence we've done and our own personal experiences can affect what we say, but this is really important to know, is that your baby's needs and demands and how it feeds over those first couple of days changes every day. And so often it's not that you're getting conflicting advice, it's that you're getting the advice that's specific to how many days your baby is old. So when a baby first comes out, we expect it to breastfeed for at least, about an hour to 2 hours.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
I've got to let you know there's lots of questions, but you can't see them.
Oh, no.
There's questions galore.
Mr.
Why don't you turn around?
I have got it turned around.
Oh,
I don't know why I can't see. Oh, I can see my viewers. Oh, no. Do you want to read them out to me? Do you want to have... how come you can't see them? We could have question and answer, Mr. Coram Floorstar.
No. I just know that there are questions. That's all I know.
Damn. All right, I'll try and... Can you try and figure it out? And then... when you're watching that, is there questions there?
Well, I wasn't watching it, but...
Yeah, but if you go into it, there should be comments. What was I talking about? Damn it. What was I just talking about? They can't even tell me because I can't even see any of the comments. I don't know why that's the case. No. Okay, so when your baby first comes out, I remember now, it breastfeeds for about 1 to 2 hours, and then it should have a sleep. So the Australian Breastfeeding Association says that baby can have a sleep in that first day up to about 8 hours. Sometimes it'll
Swipe
say...
across the screen to show comments. Thank you, Emma Branson. Swipe left or right?
I'm swiping, it's like I'm on Tinder.
Is that them?
No, it's just people watching and I can only see my friends. Nah. Lost you altogether.
Okay, do you suggest creams for your nipples?
Do I suggest what?
Should you buy creams for your nipples? Should you buy an electric pump while you're pregnant to hold off until your bubbles born, see how breastfeeding establishes first?
Okay.
Would you mix colostrum with the milk when it comes in or feed them at different feeds? And that's it.
Okay. So, pump question. You can have, this is a manual pump. So you pop your nipple in the center there, make sure there's good suction, and it's a hand pump, and then there's a electronic pump that you pop on and it just sucks itself. It's up to you. You can buy them really well secondhand. It's going to depend what you're doing. If you're going back to work, if you want to express and give a bottle, sometimes people want their partners to do that. I do encourage, if you're going to breastfeed at night time and let your partner give a bottle during the daytime feeds, and that's because your hormones that make milk are higher at night. So I had a pump given to me. I was really lucky. My sister-in-law gave me one and I needed it, so I was really lucky. They are things that you can get quite, you can hire them often from chemists. Some hospitals will hire them out as well. There are a lot for sale on Gumtree and Facebook. So if you can buy a secondhand one that's working really well, that can be a better and cheaper option. Hand pumps are pretty cheap and good to have as well.
Speech bubble at the top can disable or enable comments. Is it that?
No. And so, yeah, there's lots of different options. It's a personal preference. If you've got the money and you can get one, I highly recommend them because they're just great if you end up going out or going away for a night or something like that. They're a really great option to have as well. That was pumps. Colostrum. So when your baby is born, you make colostrum. It is typically, but not always for everyone, quite a thick substance, and it's really nutrient dense. And so for a tiny little bit, your baby gets a hell of a lot of nutrients. And I like to think of it as the undercoat in your house. It goes in and lines your whole baby's gastrointestinal tract, and it's the first protection. And so people will choose to give the baby colostrum and then they don't want to breastfeed anymore because they know the benefits of colostrum. And so that is an option as well. You can do whatever you choose to do. So the colostrum is thick. It's kind of like custard or honey looking. It's quite yellow. And that's when your baby's tummy is only very, very small. And so it goes in and fills up your baby's tummy. Now, when a baby's first born, they don't have a suck, swallow, breathe reflex. And so what they'll do is they'll go suck, 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 suck. And then it's really hard work sucking. And so they'll stop. And they'll stop to swallow and breathe and have a little rest. And so often people think, oh, they've stopped feeding. Oh, they've started again. That stop-start is really normal and natural and should happen. And so that's the baby feeding. Another really great resource is Pinky McKay. She does a lot around breastfeeding, and she talks a lot around... she's got some really great resources, but she talks about the hand a lot with breastfeeding. So when a baby's hungry, its hand is closed, and when it's full, its hand is relaxed and open. And we talk about that milk coma very much like Christmas. If you celebrate Christmas dinner where you've, or lunch where you've had too much to eat and you feel like you need to undo your belt and go and lay down and have a sleep. And that's typically what babies get. Breastfeeding also makes people that are doing it very sleepy too, which is why it's a great resource to go back to do during the night. And I will say, please don't get on your phones during the night when you're breastfeeding, because that light is not good for you. It wakes you up and you're working against your body. Your body's trying to naturally get you back to sleep. And so it will enable you to do that. Sometimes you may fall asleep with baby at the breast, and so it's really important that you're in a safe environment when you're breastfeeding so baby can't roll off the bed. So just be a bit aware of that as well. So when baby comes out, it has a really good 1 to 2 hour breastfeed, and then it can have a really good sleep. And the idea of that is so the baby recovers from birth and you recover from birth. The reality is that you have a lot of adrenaline post-birth, and you just want to look at your baby and just idolize it and fall in love with it and tell everyone that you've had a baby. And you're often just going, okay, that just happened, and you're in disbelief and a bit of shock, and you're debriefing the birth process in your own head. Your partner's probably sound asleep. I can remember, 2-3 hours after Banjo was born, him and Mick were in our bed, sound asleep, and I was like, do. Like, what do I do now? And so it's really common that you won't sleep then, but that's the whole idea of it. And so what happens in that first 24 hours is you get what's called a good baby. And so people are like, oh, I've got the perfect baby. It sleeps so well. It's only woken a couple of times. This is awesome. And then day 2 to 3, your baby starts to wake up, its tummy starts to expand, its demands start to increase. And remember, babies are born with that extra 10% to carry them through the first couple of days. And so we expect babies, every place is different with when they weigh them. Some hospitals will weigh at 48 hours, some will weigh day 3, some won't weigh till day 5. So it's something to ask your care providers when they'll first weigh the baby. Some won't wait till day 5, but if there are issues that come to their attention, and they think, oh, there could be something, this baby might not be having as much breast milk as we would like, they may weigh earlier. And again, like anything, weight is one measurement and one little piece of a puzzle, and so they will look into everything that's going on. So yeah, first day your baby is typically really good, and then second day baby starts to wake up and it wants to demand more. And so nights 2 and nights 3 should be really active. And if you've got a baby that's kicking during the night, it's times that it's programmed to be awake. It's a night shift worker, and your baby knows that the hormones that make the milk are highest at night too. And so it wants to feed a lot at nighttime, typically. So this is a healthy, well baby. And so it's really common for you not to get much sleep at all, nights 2 or nights 3. And it's really common for women to think, my baby's not getting enough, it's starving, it's hungry. And it's not that it is any of those things, it's that it's increasing its demand to increase your supply and bring the milk in and change that colostrum to milk. And you'll see that as evidence in your baby's nappy, as the poo colour starts to change. So it's a really important thing that you understand and normalize that baby will feed quite frequently at night, and babies can do what's called cluster feeding. And so that's where they go on the breast for 20 minutes, come off the breast, go back on, come off. And so they go on and on and off, on and off. And it feels like for 4 hours, all you've done is breastfeed. But then they'll have a really big sleep. And so breastfeeding is best looked at as a 24-hour picture. And so you can go, okay, I fed 5 times in that 4 hours, but then it had a 3 to 4 hours sleep. Then it woke up for half an hour, had a feed, and then another 3 to 4 hours sleep. So in 24 hours, it's fed 8 to 12 times as it should have, and it's had good sleeps. But for that 4-hour chunk, it was pretty hard for me. I wanted to be asleep because it's when I'm normally asleep. It's often midnight to 4 a.m. or 2 to 6 a.m. And I often say to new mums, and I took this advice myself, your day doesn't start when your partner gets up to go to work at 7 to 9 o'clock. Because that's often when baby has a really good feed and then has a good sleep. And so your day, if you've with your first child, obviously this doesn't work if you've got more than one child, but shouldn't really start until midday when that baby's had a really good second sleep. And people go on about, oh yeah, sleep when my baby sleeps, clean when my baby cleans, all that kind of stuff. Those first 6 weeks, you really should be sleeping when your baby's sleeping. There shouldn't be anything else to distract you. If you have another child, I completely understand, but as a first-time mum, unless it's an important medical appointment or something like that you have to actually have, those mornings are for sleeping and catching up on the sleep that you didn't get at night. And if you don't get that, then you are going to head down that sleep deprivation path, and that's not healthy for anyone. So yes, just know that some babies will cluster feed, some babies won't. My son never did. He fed every 3 hours on the dot in those first weeks. Now, he'd still breastfeed now all the time if I let him. But that's more of a comfort and a getting my attention thing than anything else, or having some time with me is what I should say instead. So yeah, Pinky McKay has really good information too, and it really normalizes the normal behavior. So when I say that advice can be conflicting, that's what I'm talking about. That first day baby's quite sleepy, doesn't feed as much. Second day baby feeds a lot more frequently. And then that milk starts to come in, and then every baby is different. I can remember my midwife saying she had 3 babies and every breastfeeding journey was different. Her first baby was really efficient and fed in like 10 minutes every feed, and that was it. Whereas her third baby took like an hour to drain the breast. And so that's really important to know too, that your breastfeeding relationship will be different based on each child. I keep having these things come into my head to tell you about and then I forget. I'm just going to check my notes. On the Robin Thompson video, she really demonstrates how a baby feeds at one side and then how the mother just lays the baby down on its legs and watches the baby, and it has this stretch, and it really helps with what the baby's doing is trying to digest the milk, and so it stretches and is a bit sleepy and then it starts to wake up again, and so we often say, let baby do that, let baby digest that first breast, have that milk, then change the nappy in between, because as a baby feeds it relaxes, and so it often wheezes and poos itself then, and so if you change the nappy at the start you often have to change it again at the end. So changing that nappy after the first feed where the baby's filled its tummy a little bit, it's relaxed, it's done its farts, it's done its poos, change the nappy and then offer the other breast and let it fill up its stomach and then have a good sleep after that. So every feed you really want to offer both breasts. Sometimes baby will take them and sometimes it doesn't. And just like I said last week, you want to relate it to you. You don't eat the exact same amount at the exact same time every day. Some of you might if you're really strict with training and nutrition, but the majority of us don't. And think about your pregnancy and how different you ate during that time. Babies are the same. They're not going to have a 20-minute feed at 8 o'clock every single day. Some babies will be a bit more clockwork than others, but you have days where you're more hungry and days when you're less hungry, and so babies are the same, and when they're growing they're going to have that. The other thing that is crucial to know with breastfeeding is what's called leaps. My favorite book for every parent to own post-birth, and the only one I really recommend in terms of development, is called The Wonder Weeks. So this was a PhD that I think it was a couple undertook, to be honest, and they've basically done research over 40 years internationally in many, many different countries on cognitive development. So we know and we understand really well physical growth spurts because we see them, and it's really obvious to us that, oh, that child is now, you know, a foot taller, or it's grown, or, you know, it was in 000s and now it's in 00s. It's had a growth spurt. And I can remember always looking at my son and knowing his head had grown and it had gone bigger. So as much as your baby has physical growth spurts, it has cognitive or mental growth spurts where it starts to see the world differently. So obviously babies are born, they don't have adult brains, they don't understand the world we do, the way we do, and so they go through what are called leaps. Really important to understand these and understand them during your pregnancy. I highly recommend buying the book. They do have an app that you have to pay for. I didn't love the app. It didn't have as much content like the book did, and you can just, when libraries are back open again, hire it from the library, but it's available worldwide. And so in the book, it tells you when the leaps are due. So they're calculated based on the baby's due date, not its birth date. So Banj was born at 37 weeks. And so we didn't have the 3-week leap until he was 6 weeks old. And so the first leap happens at 3 weeks. And when they go through these leaps, they're really fussy because there's a hell of a lot happening in their brain. They are understanding the world in a completely different way to what they understood it the day before. And so this is when you'll come home as a partner and your partner will say to you, take the baby, I've had enough. I haven't even been able to wee without it being on me. And so babies during a leap typically are very clingy. They also want to feed more. And it's not because of hunger. It is because of soothing and wanting to be comforted and wanting to have that human touch and affection. And so people often give up breastfeeding. There's a really high correlation between quitting breastfeeding and leaps because people think they haven't got enough milk. And they also, when babies go through growth spurts, will demand more and want to feed more because they want your body to make more milk. And so people identify that because baby goes back to what it was doing day 2, day 3, feeding all the time, feeding more frequently, and people go, I haven't got enough milk. And so they stop breastfeeding or they start to supplement. So it's a really good idea if you are questioning your milk supply to get in touch with a lactation consultant and look at the whole picture. Look at your baby's output. Look if it is settling, and look if it just, did it just take 2 days and then baby stopped doing that, because if that's the case, then it was probably a leap. If baby's putting on weight and its output is good, then your baby is getting enough milk. So there's lots around getting enough milk, and Robin Thompson is a really great resource that has a lot of information on that. The other thing I really wanted to touch on quickly was dummies. So breastfeeding friendly hospitals have discuss that information around dummies and don't encourage the use of them. So when you're trying to establish breastfeeding, so ideally not introducing a dummy for the first 6 weeks, because it can take 6 weeks to establish breastfeeding. It does take 6 weeks to establish breastfeeding, is really important. And the way I like to explain it is, obviously the dummy is meant to replicate the nipple. That's what it's there for. So babies, like I said before, breastfeeding isn't just about getting milk out. They'll want to be there to suck and soothe. So sucking is a soothing response. So that's why dummies work really well. And for formula fed babies that don't spend as much time sucking, because it's quicker and easier to get milk out of a bottle than it is to breastfeed often. It's a lot harder work for babies. So they using a dummy for babies that are formula fed or bottle fed can be really soothing for them. But if you are breastfeeding, it can really interfere with attachment, and that's because a dummy is completely different to a breast, and the way a baby sucks on a dummy is very different to a breast. The way I also explain it too is breastfeeding is hard work for that baby at the start, and so if you give your newborn baby a dummy to suck on, it is going to get tired, and it's like going for a run and then trying to run a marathon. You've already warmed up and used your energy, and so that it interferes with breastfeeding. The other thing is that it doesn't allow you to see breastfeeding cues. So how do you know if your baby's hungry? How do you know when to feed it? Is by watching baby, and crying is a late cue. So I often explain crying as hangry. And you know what it's like when you're at home and you start to feel a bit hungry. You'll prepare a really good meal, and you'll take the time and you'll prepare it and you'll eat it really well. When you get to hangry, you'll go through Macca's drive-through and grab a cheeseburger and eat whatever you can find as quick as you can find, and it might not be the best meal that you have. And so when baby gets to crying, it's really hangry, and it's used a lot of its energy to try and communicate with you to tell you that it's hungry. And so babies often, when they're in that hangry crying state, get on the breast and go, oh, thank goodness, have a quick feed, don't have a really good feed. Or a good long feed, because they don't have the energy, or they've worked themselves up so much, and so they don't feed as well. So what a baby starts to do is it basically starts to wake up. It starts to open its eyes, lick its lips, and it starts to bob its head around like, where's that boob? Give me that boob. Looking for that boob. And that's when you know your baby's hungry. And so you pick your baby up, you might undress it to do skin to skin, and you just might lay with it for a little bit. You might hold it upright and let it find the breast, or if it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you're 3 weeks in, you're just going to attach baby to the breast that way. So feeding cues are really important, and there'll be signs up around the hospital that show you these. So, licking the hand, sucking the hand, basically just starting to wake up, and they're exploring, they're looking for the breast. That says, I'm hungry. I'm hangry is I'm crying. So please don't wait till your baby's crying to feed it. And getting yourself comfortable is really important. Nobody knows neck and shoulder pain like the mother of a newborn. It is really uncomfortable holding that baby and being in that position for a lot, and you're constantly sitting. But getting yourself comfortable and going to the toilet, those kind of things are really important. But you also want to get to your baby at a good time as well. So emptying your bladder, getting yourself a drink, doing those things as quick as you can, and then popping baby on the breast is crucial. So I'm trying not to go too far over time today, because it's really hard for Charmaine to translate for this long. So I think I have covered, like I said, I've only covered things in really small doses tonight. There is so much on breastfeeding. Please join the Australian Breastfeeding Association, read their book, get on Robin Thompson, link in with Lactation Consultants, find out now while you're pregnant what services are available in your area, what the hospital offers, what are private services. So there are midwives that'll do private postnatal care, which includes breastfeeding. I'm going to talk next week around postpartum doulas and lots of stuff like that. But if you've got any questions, pop them up. I'll look into it. I'll try and answer you tonight or tomorrow. And if I need to cover some extra things next week, I will. Thanks so much for joining in. It's been an absolute pleasure doing these classes, and I'm a bit sad that they're going to end next week. I hope that, hand expression. I better do that quickly. There's some really cool YouTube videos on hand expression, so I'm not going to go through it too much. And the other thing I wanted to touch on was engorgement and what you can do for that. So sometimes when your milk comes in, it's really common to feel a bit cold and fluey, like you're getting a cold. That can be that way. Headaches can be normal too if you're not drinking a lot. Remember, you are making milk. Making milk consumes 500 calories a day, so eating well and drinking well is really crucial. I'm a big fan of lactation biscuits because most of them taste really good. There's some really good brands out there that you can buy. I am a fan of Pinky McKay's Boob Vickies. They do taste good, but there's some beautiful companies that are making their own as well, and lots of local lactation consultants and postpartum doulas make their own lactation cookies too. You need brewers, I can't say that word, yeast, to make them, not just normal yeast. But there are lots of recipes out there, and there are different foods that help increase your supply as well. So get onto those if you're worried about supply. The other thing I will say is that fenugreek tablets are really great at increasing your supply too. But if you've got a supply issue, you should really be linking in with a lactation consultant and looking at what's going on there. So before you start any of those, it's really important to have a discussion with the lactation consultant and see what's actually happening, because you want to address the reason why you've got a supply issue, and is it attachment? Because there's no point taking a drug or even if it's a natural drug like fenugreek to increase your supply if you have issues attaching, because that's just going to create long-term effects with supply. So really important. I can't stress how valuable lactation consultants are. So when your milk comes in, it's common for your breast to be engorged, and I shared a picture of that today where the baby's boob was much bigger than the woman's boob was bigger than the baby's head. And so when your breast is really engorged, it can be really hard for the baby to get onto the breast. It's like trying to get onto a balloon. And so you may need to hand express to soften it. Heat beforehand really helps with that. So popping a warm face cloth on, so running a face cloth under hot water and popping a cloth over your breast to enable the supply to flow is a really great idea to do that. And then just gentle massaging, not like really hard round circles, but just following the line. So every breast is different. There's basically milk ducts that run down it, and you don't know how, every breast has a different amount. So you have two breasts, most people have two breasts, and so there won't be the same amount in one breast as the other. And often people will say, my baby likes this breast better and this breast has more milk, and that's really common thing for people to say and notice. I know my right side was Banjo's and my favorite side to feed. No, my left. It was my left side. Sorry, right side, giving you some compliments that you shouldn't have. So basically, you're just following that motion of gently trying to massage and stimulate down. And then, so it's heat beforehand. Then after you've breastfed, to try and help everything constrict, you want to put cold. So ice packs or really, really cold, ice packs are probably preferable. And you can get breast ice packs. They make them specifically, or you can just use an ice pack. So for engorgement, heat before, cold after works really well. So with hand expressing, you may do this in the antenatal period. Remember, from 36 weeks, unless you have issues with preterm birth or any other complications, you want to wait until at least 37 weeks. But if you are healthy and well, you can do this from around 36 weeks. So hand expression, to have just some colostrum post-birth to try and increase labour, so natural form of induction, and then expression to soften your breast, or maybe post-birth if baby's really sleepy or jaundice or having troubles attaching to the breast, you may express via hand. So we generally use hand expression in those first couple of days and then move on to either a manual or a electric pump. So when you express, there's two different ways of doing it, but you basically make your hand like a C. So if you look at my hand there, it's a C shape, and you're mimicking the baby. So you're mimicking the baby's lips, and obviously a baby has a full 360 connection to the breast. And so what you're doing is coming into the breast and down. Lots of people do this and squeeze the nipple. You don't want to do that, and it shouldn't really hurt. And so you get your boobs out now and have a little play if you want to, if you're 36 to 37 weeks and healthy and low risk. Don't be concerned if you don't have a lot. The more you do it, the more you get, but a couple of drops or a glisten is great. And if you don't get anything, that's okay too. Just keep expressing. What I want to say is if you're expressing because your baby's in the nursery or your baby's unwell or it's not feeding, please don't make it about getting milk out. Please make it about your baby. And the best way to do this is to increase oxytocin. So looking at your baby, talking about your baby, looking at pictures of your baby, or FaceTiming. So I know when I worked in really big hospitals in the city, we would and the mum wasn't able to go around and see her baby yet, we would FaceTime because we have amazing technology. And so the partner would go around and FaceTime. And so rather than it being like, come on, get some milk out, and being this really frustrating, trying to achieve something, it becomes about your baby. So if your baby's not there, talking about it with your partner can help. Your partner can really help with expression, and often they can get more than you because of the angles that they're on. It's not a competition. I do like to compete with dad sometimes. I'm much better at it because I've been doing it for years. But yeah, it's just, if you're not comfortable with that, obviously you have to be comfortable and give your consent for somebody else to express you. And same with breastfeeding too. It's really easy for us to grab a breast and put a baby on. And, when we're busy and night shift and things like that, sometimes midwives will do that. Sometimes we do it just to see what's happening. It's definitely something I never ever used to do, something I do more so now, and I shouldn't do it because it doesn't teach you anything. So just being a bit assertive there and saying, can you talk me through it or show me, with a doll and a fake breast, what you're doing is more important too. So with expressing, you're coming down and bringing your fingers closer together. So your fingers are quite far back. See how I'm not here on the nipple, or even, I'm on the outer skirts of the areola. And so I'm pushing in and then down, so bringing my fingers to meet. Another way that people do it is bringing their fingers like that, and if they've had one or more babies, they may be comfortable with this. If you get a lot of milk, it can be good to do it into a medicine or feeding cup. So you stick the cup underneath and just squirt it in like that. Otherwise, there are these syringes. I've had these since I had banjo and never got around to doing it. My midwife gave me these syringes. So these are for breast milk. That's why they're coloured this way, but you may just be given normal clear syringes by your hospital. But as you squeeze and a drop comes out, you push down. And then if you're collecting it, so if you're a partner, you want to flick it to get it all to come down and then push it up. Please don't waste it. The saying, crying over spilt milk, came from breast milk. Crying over spilt breast milk because it's a precious resource. So yeah, you're going in, squeezing and coming down, and then you're trying different parts of the breast, and you'll find the money spot. You'll get to a spot and you'll be like, oh, there's heaps of colostrum coming out there. Awesome. And you'll be able to stay on that spot for a while, but then you move around, because remember, you don't know where the milk ducts are. So think of the milk ducts. They need to be stimulated to get that breast out, the milk out. So that's all you're doing with hand expression. All right, I've tried to keep it contained tonight and I didn't get to. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you for our final episode, our grand finale, next week.